Well, Maddie is the only juror from the case to speak out publicly and reveal her identity. And also joining Maddie is legal analyst and attorney Lisa Bloom, who has written a new book that is, you cannot put this down, Suspicion Nation, the inside story of the Trayvon Martin injustice and why we continue to repeat it. An absolute compelling read. Lisa, it's good to see you. Maddie, thanks for being here. There were 6 women on this jury.
Yes.
And you were the only minority, correct?
Yes.
And the jury brought back a not guilty verdict, and that haunts you to this day.
I'm a godly person. If you kill somebody, you're guilty. It's sad to say that because of a law that was written and it was described to me that I had to follow this law against my own will. In my heart, I knew that he was guilty, but I couldn't use my heart. I had to use the law.
And so you voted not guilty when you felt in your mind and heart that he was guilty.
Yes.
You know, Lisa, did she have a choice in the way she voted here?
She didn't. And Maddie's very brave to speak out in the way that she is. I blame the prosecution in the state of Florida. I go through in the book the 6 biggest blunders they made. And putting it all together, they failed to connect the law and the facts that they had to give jurors like Maddie and the other jurors who wanted to convict a roadmap to conviction. The prosecutors made mistake after mistake in this case. I'll give you one of the biggest ones. George Zimmerman showed on a videotape that his gun was holstered behind him inside his pants. And he says he was lying on his back with Trayvon Martin on top of him, straddling him at the moment that Trayvon Martin saw the gun, reached for the gun, and threatened to kill Zimmerman. And Zimmerman says, at that point, I had to pull the gun and shoot in self-defense. The problem with that story is, unless Trayvon Martin had X-ray vision, there is no way he could have seen through George Zimmerman's body to a gun holstered behind him. The prosecution inexplicably failed to argue that, failed to give the jury that information that they had on a videotape for over a year. There are many people in America who found this verdict very unsatisfying, and I was one of them, having watched the trial.
You say that you were bullied and teased and discriminated against as a juror.
One of the other jurors, every time I would say something like, I said ramen noodles, she would say, you don't even know how to say that right. I had said another word, and she was like, oh my God, did you hear Maddie say? And it was just a constant, I felt like we were in high school. I really took this situation, this case, I really took it very serious. And out of all this, I feel like it became a mockery, because when I came out of this, it became that I was the bad guy. I got people telling me, you could have done something, you could have said something, you could have been there. And I've tried everything within a year to change my life, to see what I could have done. But I shouldn't be punished for Trayvon Martin's death.
Well, let's take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about 2 really important things. I want to hear from Lisa, because according to her, the prosecution missed other critical evidence that could have gotten George Zimmerman convicted. We all want to know what that is. And then I want to talk to Maddie about what her life has been like since this verdict came back. We'll be right back. It's been 2 years since George Zimmerman shot and killed unarmed teen Trayvon Martin and walked out scot-free. Now, one person responsible for George's acquittal is jury member Maddie. Now, joining Maddie is legal analyst and attorney Lisa Bloom. She wrote a new book called Suspicion Nation, and this book really dissects this trial, the way the evidence came in and didn't come in. What happened in the jury room? Was it difficult to express your opinions in the jury room?
Yes.
Why?
When I first came in, I didn't see myself as different. But as the time of me being there for 3 weeks, I could tell that I was different. Mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's not just only by color. It's also by where I was raised. It was also by who you know, not the culture, but mostly I was younger, a little bit more younger than them, and I had younger kids. So a lot of them couldn't understand where I was coming from, so they didn't even take the time to get to know Maddie for who Maddie is. I just always felt that discomfort where I wasn't in the right place. They didn't make me feel too comfortable.
The other jurors?
The other jurors.
Did they take this seriously?
Depending on who was sitting down in the witness stand, just like the situation with Rachel Jeantel. You know, the first day everybody was stating that they couldn't understand her, they couldn't understand her talk, and I could hear them saying, you know, what is she saying? What kind of conversation is that? Like if she was from another planet, and I understood her. I understood everything she was saying, you know. And a lot of people are like, she shouldn't have been on the stand. She didn't say anything that we needed to hear.
Well, if y'all missed it, this was a key witness. Let's listen to this. We'll show you a clip so you know what we're talking about.
Prosecutors say Zimmerman racially profiled Martin and decided to take matters into his own hands. But the defense insists it was Martin who injected race into the confrontation. The teenager was on the phone with his friend Rachel Jeantel and told her a man was following him.
I had asked him how the man looked like. He looked like a creepy cracker.
So it was racial, but it was because Trayvon Martin put race in this.
Defense attorneys claim Martin started the fight and Zimmerman shot in self-defense.
Rachel Jeantel was the most important prosecution witness because she was on the phone with Trayvon Martin in the moments leading up to his encounter and at the very beginning of his encounter with George Zimmerman. This is a 19-year-old girl. She made it very clear to everyone she did not want to be part of this high-profile case. She was absolutely terrified. And so what a good prosecutor would do would be go meet with her at her home, get her comfortable, another day have her come into the office, maybe on a third day take her to an empty courtroom, put her up on the witness stand, get her used to talking into microphones, which is very intimidating to a lot of people, go over the story with her. It turns out she had an underbite, Dr. Phil, so that made her hard to understand. Yeah, that's just a medical condition, has nothing to do with credibility. The prosecutors never pointed that out. And so she came across to the jury as a person who really is kind of mumbling and muttering and has poor communication style. And to hear from Maddie that Rachel Jeantel was completely discounted by this jury is absolutely heartbreaking, because when you hear her story, as I do and as I tell it in the book, her story is Trayvon Martin was afraid of George Zimmerman. He thought he was creepy. He was trying to get away from him over and over again. When he did get away from him, he returned to a jokey, fun conversation he was having with Rachel. He was teasing her about doing her hair. He was asking about the All-Star game he wanted to get home in time to watch. This is not a homicidal killer who was lying in wait for George Zimmerman, which was Zimmerman's story. Unfortunately, that story never got to the jury because the prosecutors didn't prepare her effectively.
Did they make a strategic mistake in not focusing on the racial profiling aspect of this case?
They did. Now look, practically everybody in America is uncomfortable talking about race. But we have to talk about race sometimes. And the reason why this case got so much attention was because of the racial angle. Now, the defense in this case was very straightforward about race. They put on a young white woman who said she'd been the victim of a burglary by one or two African-American men. That was one of their last witnesses, right? Simple cross-examination the prosecution should have done. Do these guys have anything to do with Trayvon Martin? No. Okay, why are we hearing about them then? You know, to attribute the wrongs of two African-American men to all African-Americans is the very definition of racism. Trayvon Martin was a stranger to those burglars. He was not a burglar. He had no criminal record. And how dare the defense put on a witness like that? The prosecution should have been on their feet on cross-examination and ranting and raving about that in closing argument. They never did it.
Okay, Maddie is one of the jurors who voted not guilty and let George Zimmerman get off scot-free. How does she feel about how he has been acting since and what's been happening in her life? We'll be right back. Well, the book is Suspicion Nation, and legal analyst and author Lisa Bloom is here. She has written this book because she is outraged about what happened in the Trayvon Martin case. And joining us also is Maddie. Maddie is one of the jurors in this case. She's one of the jurors that voted that George Zimmerman was not guilty. But one of the things that I always pay attention to from my professional standpoint of psychology and human behavior is, with the passage of time, you don't have to speculate, you can measure. You say, well, I wonder if this person is going to be okay or not? Well, you can speculate about it, or with the passage of time, you can look and see what they do. Well, here's what George Zimmerman has done since the trial. July 31st, he was pulled over for speeding and had a gun in the glove box. August 22nd, he toured a gun-making factory, and on the 9th, his wife called 911 and said he was threatening her and her father with a gun. November 18th of 30, arrested and charged with aggravated assault, domestic violence, battery, and criminal mischief after his girlfriend calls the police. Those charges were dropped. January 30th, he agreed to a celebrity boxing match. And he even told CNN that he was a victim as well. Take a look.
Thoughts about the victim, Trayvon Martin?
I certainly was a victim when I was having my head bashed into the concrete and my nose broken and beaten.
Listening to the evidence, did it make you doubt yourself?
No.
Why not?
Faith. I know.
In yourself or in God?
No, God. I know that ultimately He's the only judge that I have to answer to. He knows what happened. I know what happened. So I leave it up to Him.
Well, there you have it. So he's a victim as well. Let's talk for just a minute about what the aftermath has been for you. You've received death threats.
Yes.
In what way, what form, what are people saying?
I had a threat where someone expressed to me that I was going to feel the same feelings and the same hurt that Trayvon Martin's mother feels. I got an 18-year-old son and a 20-year-old son. And that that I was going to feel the pain.
You've had to move. And where do you, I don't mean specifically, but do you have a house now? Are you homeless? What?
I live with a friend who's allowed me and 8 of us live in a 1-bedroom apartment right now.
8 of you.
It's just not fair. I shouldn't have to get blamed for someone else's actions.
All right, coming up, we ask our viewers at home if they thought they were racist. The answers might surprise you. We'll be right back. We wanted to see how many of you at home admitted to being racially biased. Now, we just put this up this morning. We've had over 26,000 responses in just a couple of hours. Do you find yourself using racial profiling? 41% said yes, 59% said no. We then ask, are there times when you find yourself being suspicious of someone because they are a minority? 46% said yes, 54% said no. This is something that continues to plague America in general, and it continues to play a role in the courtrooms. True?
And this is one of the root problems of the Trayvon Martin case and the cases we continue to see. And I was fascinated to learn about the concept of implicit racial bias that I talk about in the book. So most of us think, I'm not racist, right? And consider that to be a horrible insult, which it is. But that doesn't get at the root problem, which is that we do have racial biases. We all walk around with them because we live in a culture with a lot of negative images of African Americans in particular. And there's a very clever test that you can take online to see whether you have implicit biases. You can't cheat the test. And when people take that test, about 70 to 80% of white Americans test that, yes, we have racial biases against African Americans. About 50% of African Americans have racial bias against African Americans. So the first step is sort of acknowledging that and understanding it. And then the second step is that we can move on from it. And that's the good news.
Lisa's book is Suspicion Nation. And this is a compelling read. It is something that I really think makes people think. I think it's really going to make you think. So her new book, Suspicion Nation, the inside story of the Trayvon Martin injustice, and more importantly, why we continue to repeat it, is on sale now, and everybody in the audience is going home with a copy of the book. So you all get one.